What is the worst interview you've had where you still got a job offer? I traveled some distance to another town on the intercity bus service. I was super poor then for a really promising job interview that I was hoping would get me out of the dead end shit I had been doing until having lost my job a few weeks prior. On the way, the bus crashed into a bin truck, the ones which come and collect your curbside bins every week. It was a low speed collision and the damage was not severe, and the main bus depot for this service was in the town I was traveling to, so after paperwork happened, we carried on. The bus did not have seatbelts, and I had whacked my skull on the vertical steel hand grab pole, and bloodied my knuckles on the top seat handle in front of me. No biggie, I thought. So, I called the job and told them I was delayed. And why? No worries, they said. Got lost between the bus stop and the job, one street away. This should have been a sign. But no. Rocked up to the interview, not realizing that I was bleeding from the head and knuckles, looking like I'd just had a casual street fight on the way to my interview. Sat on a nice swivel ergonomic office chair in the interview room with the two big bosses and an it person. We exchange pleasantries. Then they start asking the questions. I have been revising for this, so I start pumping out 360 deg points spin on the office chair, all the knowledge on group policies, and 360 deg points spin on the office chair, roaming profiles, and spin the other way to cancel the dizziness, remote installations and other NT4 stuff. Then switches and routers and stuff. Half of this shit is theory only to me at this point, but I reckon I'm doing okay. They start asking about my knowledge of the nascent web technologies, HTML, FTP, Telnet, and I manned 720 deg points spin on the office chair, kicking my legs out for extra momentum part way through, and really leaning into it, wearing well and confidently. They seem happy, but there's maybe a bit of nervous vibe in the room. I dunno. Then they address me by the name of a former colleague. I clarify that isn't me. They ask, didn't I previously work at shithole ISP? I say yes, but I'm SFC not Doug. Oh, never mind. They say point I go home somehow, no memory of it, and immediately sleep. They call the next day to offer me the job. Later, they tell me about what I had been doing. They had not known that I had been in a crash, just that I was delayed. So from their perspective, a lunatic with a meter-long ponytail rocked up late to an interview, bleeding from the head and fist, like a maniac. This guy then proceeded to answer their questions very satisfactorily whilst spinning round and round on the office chair. Said lunatic then reveals he's not the guy they thought they had invited for interview, and they admitted that they wondered if I'd actually just physically fought the guy that day in order to take the job interview slot. Obviously I was concussed, but must have done something right or looked too dodgy to refuse, because I had that job 4 years. I had a stomach flu and sharted mid-interview. I knew that he noticed. He knew that I knew. I somehow managed to get the job after the war crime that occurred in his office. After about 6 months we became pretty close, and he came up to me saying he hired me because of my professionalism during extreme pressure. So keep up the shitty work. Then he immediately tried to backpedal because it sounded bad. Sears at the local mall. I applied but then got hired elsewhere the very next day. When they called me to schedule an interview, I told them about the job I already accepted and declined the interview. A couple weeks later Sears called again asking why I wasn't showing up for my shifts. I'm assuming it was a clerical error, but I got hired at the place where I refused to even interview. I had just moved to Hawaii and had gotten an interview for a position at a Skechers store that was opening at a mall very close to where I lived. But to interview for the position I had to travel to the only other location on Oahu, which was practically on the other side of the island. Since I was new to the island and not familiar with public transportation, I grossly underestimated how long it would take to make the trip and wound up arriving 2 hours late. I don't know why I even bothered to go in at that point, but I walked in and introduced myself to the manager anyway. When he commented on how late I was, I apologized and told him I didn't realize it would take 3.5 hours to get across the island by bus. He looked at me in astonishment and said, "You traveled 3.5 hours just for a job interview?" I told him yes. They hired me on the spot. Forgot about the interview. They call me 45 minutes later while I'm driving. I pull over with 1 bar signal strength. I make up an excuse that I thought they were supposed to call me but never did. I'm a software engineer, so I explained I didn't have my computer, but they said no problem, and they screen shared coding questions. It took a 30 seconds to load the question/image due to slow cell phone data. As they were reading the question, I just guessed the answers based on prior experience. Never saw the actual question. And that, kids, is how I landed my current position that pays 100k plus a year ago. I've been promoted twice since then. My friends say I have the incredible ability of failing upward. I have to agree. I know a guy who went to the wrong business for an interview. As he rushed out, one of the staff stopped him asking a bunch of questions. My friend was rude and quickly answered them as he didn't want to be late for the interview. By the time he got to the right place, he was too late. Upset, he walked home past the first business. The same staff member that stopped him before ran out and asked how the interview went. He explained the outcome and apologized for being rude earlier. The staff member told him he wasn't being rude at all, and if he wanted a job they were hiring security staff. No interview needed. This staff member was actually the business owner of a citywide security company. My friend worked there for 5 years, made his way up to supervisor. Managing a crazy busy seafood place, 30k a night place, but small tourist town. Owner sent me for a drug test on first day, told him I would fail. He said I was off the charts for coke, like I was doing it that day. Hired me and I ran the shit out of his kitchen, and he never brought it up again. I passed out in an interview and still got the job. The day before, as an experiment, I ate a gram of pretty decent hash. No effect. I go to bed and wake the next day in bad shape. Complete vertigo. Could barely move. Went to the interview with my buddy and passed out right there in the middle of it. Evidently, the interviewers thought me passing out wasn't a good thing, but my buddy covered for me, said I wanted the job so bad. I showed up with an inner ear issue and vertigo. Great cover story, considering he didn't know what was actually the problem. Mind you, it was a job working on a game for the Atari Jaguar system, so you can guess how well it all played out. During college, I interviewed for a student job as a church musician. Things were going very well until the pastor informed me that I couldn't practice the organ after 5 p.m. because he lived next door in the rectory. Wanted peace and quiet, and could hear the instrument even with the windows closed. When I explained that I was a full-time student during the day and could only practice evenings, he said that we had arrived at an impasse. Several days later, the pastor contacted me with a job offer, saying that he had reconsidered and thought I was the right person for the post, asking that I simply not allow the organ to be played too big at night. I've worked in various care jobs in England for many years. Private so-called care companies running on a shoestring now do what local councils would have done. Went for an interview at 1 year ago. At 10 a.m. outside the office. There's nobody in the place. No note on the door. Lights off. Nobody answering the phone. About 10:30 people turn up with no explanation. I sit and wait in reception. In England there's a body called the CQC that inspects and grades any organization offering care to people. The last results were framed on the wall. On all counts the company graded as the worst possible score. Interview starts with a woman who seems to think I can start right now. Today, when I ask questions about hours, pay, etc., she finds it very strange, comical even. At one point she said, "You're not a reporter, are you?" The reason why nobody was in the office was that so many employees quit. The office staff and managers had to go out and do the calls on elderly people the staff should have done. I'm told they expect employees to be on call 7 days a week. Maybe there's work, maybe there isn't. When I left, quite stunned at how pitiful the place was. The woman interviewing me seemed surprised I didn't want the job. A few weeks ago I applied for a barista position in a local grocery store coffee shop. I showed up about 45 minutes early. In fear of being late, I had none of the necessary paperwork with me and pretty much stuttered my way through all of the questions the manager asked me. I was on the verge of a panic attack for the entire 20-minute interview. The manager asked about work experience and I explained that I was self-employed but have no other experience. We got into a conversation about my volunteer work and I ended up rambling about something irrelevant. I was sure that I was never going to be hired there or anywhere else based on how this was going. At the end of the interview, he said, "Hey, so you actually can't apply for this part-time position, which was stated on our website." I apologized, and he responded with, "But we do need a bagger. How about you go home and reapply for that position? This might be a better position for you anyway. You pretty much make your own hours, and it is part-time, so you can focus on your education. I can't promise anything, but we do need people." He could tell that I was anxious and switched his whole demeanor so that I felt more comfortable, making jokes and asking more about the volunteer experience I was rambling about. Yeah, I opened up my email this morning and I've been hired. So that's good. I guess my extreme anxiety scored me a job.